For Morningstar, I'm Jeremy Glazer. August jobs report has been weak for the last several years, and I'm here with Bob Johnson, our Director of Economic Analysis, for his preview of Friday's report and what he thinks it could mean for the Fed's actions in September. Bob, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here today.
So before we get into why August report has sometimes been a little bit of an outlier, let's start by looking at the ADP numbers, which we got on Wednesday, 190,000 jobs added. What's your take on this report?
Yeah, I think it was a decent report. I think one that's indicative that maybe August won't be a disaster this time around. I think the ADP report at 190,000 is actually a little bit more than what they reported on their basis for July, which was 177,000. So certainly when you've got an improvement in that number, that adds an extra dollop of helping that the number might be okay.
So where are these jobs being added in terms of small, medium, large businesses?
Yeah. And again, it's important to look at small, medium, and large. And usually large tends to lead the economy a little bit more, and small tends to be lagging to concurrent, and the mediums are pretty concurrent. And this time it was relatively more balanced. We actually had a pretty bad month. We had several bad months in the corporate large sector. And at 40,000 jobs, it still wasn't great. We added roughly twice as many jobs on the small business side, the 80,000 jobs there. So clearly, small business is doing a little better, but it's not. We've seen dispersion worse than that in the past.
What about sectors? Where are jobs being added there?
Yeah. Again, it's very interesting to look at. Almost all of the jobs net are usually added in the service sector, and it wasn't any different this time. Around the edges, we like to look at what construction and manufacturing do, and manufacturing had a particularly strong month, yet again adding 17,000 jobs, which kind of builds on our concept that U.S. GDP growth in the back half of the year is going to be very dependent on the housing and construction industries. And we're glad that it's doing well and that they added 17,000 jobs, at least according to ADP. And by the way, ADP thinks their construction number is better than the government's because they survey 3 times as many people as the government does in this particular category. So they're feeling good about the construction industry. Manufacturing was a positive surprise in the report. Things have been a little bit dicey there, and we have good months and we have bad months. But the general trend has been not so good. And they say we added 7,000 manufacturing jobs in August, which is a little bit better than I might have guessed given some of the recent activity we've seen recently. So maybe those numbers aren't quite as bad as they look. So 7,000 jobs there. One other positive surprise in the report was the financial sector, which had a great month in July. And had even a better month in August. So that was very good to see. That number had grown in the very low single thousands, and now we're back into the double-digit teens type of numbers in thousands for jobs added there. So clearly something's happening right in financial. And again, it's not necessarily in the securities business. It's probably under its own share of pressures, but coming out of banking, insurance, and even the Fed in the U.S. So those were good numbers to see. I'd say the only thing that looked a little soft to me is the professional business services. It's a category I usually like to do very well because it's a very good paying sector. And it only added 28,000. And I think the trend's more up in the 40, 50,000 a month there. So that was one disappointment in the ADP report by sector.
So looking forward to Friday's report, what do you expect? Do you think we're going to get another one of these very, very low numbers as we have over the last couple of years?
Yeah. Well, let me give you my thought. I mean, in general, I think things feel like they may be softened in a couple of categories over the summer. Some of it was just doldrums, but I'm thinking 175,000, which isn't too far off the ADP number of 190,000, but quite a bit below the consensus, which is about 220,000 jobs added. So clearly, I think that you're going to have a little bit of the August jinx working in there. Plus a little bit of softness. So I'm thinking around 175.
I know you've looked at some recent research about this August jinx,
yes.
about why this seems to keep happening. What are people finding about that?
Yeah, we looked at some work from Capital Economics this morning that I thought was fascinating, and it showed that the average revision for the month of August in recent history is about 94,000 from first report to the third report. And if you looked at the other months, month by month, they average about 38,000. So this August is a real outlier. The revisions are typically 3 times what they are for any other month of the year. So the first read is a little bit dangerous on this one. And so we'll have to be very careful about that.
Why is this number often so off?
Yeah, I think the big part of it is the auto industry. I mean, they've gone from a situation where they always had one big summer shutdown, everybody observed the same 2 weeks, and then we went through a period where we were coming out of the recession and nobody took a week, and then some took a week in August and some in July. And so people have been all over the board with how they do that. And of course, the statistical factors, they aren't allowed to say who did the shutdowns what month. They just have to say statistically over the last 20 years what's happened and putting a little bit more weight on the last 5. So hopefully with all the switching around that finally they'll get that August, after blowing it so many times in a row, that they'll get the seasonal factor a little closer, although it moves slowly back towards norms. So that's why I'm thinking the number will be modestly disappointing, but maybe not the disasters that it's been in the past. And by the way, this is to show you last year, there was just over 100,000 jobs added in the first report, which was viewed as a disaster. And by the time the thing got all done being revised, there were over 200,000, twice as many jobs added in August as people thought. So be very careful about examining this number, which everybody's not apt to do.
Now, of course, one of the reasons people are so anxious to see this number is because it'll be the last jobs number that the Fed gets before the September meeting, the first meeting where they could consider a rate increase. Do you think the Fed is going to be faked out by this? If it's a very weak number, does this mean that a rate increase is completely off the table?
Yeah. Well, only if the Fed learns from its mistakes. In the past, the Fed has taken the August jobs disaster at face value and reacted to it accordingly. In 2011, it was the Operation Twist where they started buying longer-term bonds. In 2012, they started QE3 just after the August jobs report. And in 2013, they were on target to go to a taper almost immediately, and that got pushed off some months in 2013 after the poor jobs report for August. So hopefully they've learned that August is kind of a goofy month and not to become overly dependent on it. I would say if we get a really great jobs number this time around and we add 250, 300,000, well, that will certainly put a rate increase front and center. If the number is kind of 100 to 200, I think the odds are 50-50 that they do something. And if it's under 100, I'm guessing they'd still panic again and not do anything if it's a really bad jobs report. And again, revisions is in perfect hindsight, and we won't know if the numbers are really right or not for a couple months yet.
Bob, thanks for the preview, and we'll talk to you Friday after we get the government's data.
Thank you.
For Morningstar, I'm Jeremy Glazer. Thanks for watching.